Hey everyone, tonight we're going to do something a little different. You're not just listening to history or living it. We're going back over 2,000 years to the windy, bone-dry mountains of northern China. You're going to spend an entire day in the Shuozhuo, the straw sandals of a great wall builder. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive. Imagine the sting of dust in your eyes, the weight of stone digging into your back, and the constant fear that one misstep might send you tumbling off a cliff, or into the good graces of a foreman with a whip dot. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Where are you tuning in from tonight? Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. I woke up to shouting, not just a time to get up kind of shout, but the kind that rattled your ribcage and made you leap out of sleep like you were being chased by a dragon. It was still dark, the kind of black that makes you doubt the sun's ever existed. And the wind howled like a hungry ghost, trying to chew through the thin cloth of our tent. My back ached like I'd been wrestling rocks all night, which technically I had the day before. My hands were raw. I flexed them, and they cracked like dry clay. Someone outside coughed hard, then spit, and a moment later, the flap of the tent flew open. Up, a voice barked. Wall won't build itself. The overseer was a broad man with the personality of a rockslide. His eyebrows were frozen with bits of morning frost. He moved on, shouting at the next tent. I pulled on what passed for shoes, worn sandals stuffed with bits of straw that smelled faintly like goat, stepped out into the frigid morning. The air bit hard. My breath came out in little clouds, vanishing instantly in the mountain wind dot around me. Others emerged from their tents, blinking, shivering, mumbling curses or prayers or both. Most were skinny as fence posts. Farmers conscripted from the lowlands, a few criminals, easy to spot by the heavy iron collars locked around their necks, and soldiers, too, though they rarely worked unless someone important was watching. We were all here for one reason, to build a wall so wide you could march 5 horses across the top of it. Or so the legend went. We weren't anywhere near that. Yet a bell rang from the mess area, more like a rusted chunk of iron someone banged with a ladle. I followed the line toward the kitchen, which was really just a fire pit with a few battered pots and a man who stirred them with the expression of someone stirring a punishment. Breakfast was a grey sludge that might have been millet porridge. It sloshed into my wooden bowl like wet cement. I ate it with 2 fingers. No one had spoons anymore. Mine had broken a week ago, and let's just say they weren't giving out replacements like candy. Behind me, someone muttered, "Better than yesterday, no bugs, don't jinx it," another replied, already chewing suspiciously. I swallowed. Definitely a bug. As the sky lightened barely, we lined up for assignments. Today, I was lucky. I wasn't hauling dirt, I was hauling stone, which is like saying I won the chance to be punched by a different fist. Each of us got a pair of baskets tied to a pole. The stones were loaded in, and we heaved the whole contraption onto our backs like ancient, unwilling donkeys. The straps bit into my shoulders immediately. I hadn't even taken a step yet. The worksite loomed above us, literally above. The wall snaked across the ridge like the spine of some ancient monster, all jagged and uneven. The path to it was a winding, miserable climb, steep, loose, and terrifying in places where the edge just vanished. "Don't slip," someone said behind me. "Thanks, genius." Up we went. Every few steps, my feet slid a little. The baskets shifted and threw my balance off. My thighs burned. My breath came out in gusts. One guy ahead of me, maybe 16, barely able to grow a mustache, started wheezing halfway up and had to be helped by 2 others. No one mocked him. We'd all been there. By the time I reached the top, the sun was dragging itself over the horizon, painting the cliffs a kind of blood orange. It would have been beautiful if I weren't hunched over and sweating like I was being boiled alive in my own skin. I dropped the baskets with a grunt. My shoulders screamed. My back pulsed. I looked around. This was just the start. We'd be doing this all day. "First load," the foreman grunted. 19 more. I stared at him. By sundown, he wasn't joking. Historically, builders like us worked sunrise to sunset, with barely any breaks. The Qin dynasty was especially harsh. Emperor Qin Shi Huang didn't mess around. If you died on the wall, well, congratulations, you became part of it. Some legends say they buried dead workers inside the foundation. Modern historians debate that though. More likely, they just threw the bodies off the side. Yay, efficiency. I flexed my fingers again. They cracked. Someone behind me laughed. First day, I nodded. Your hands won't feel anything by next week, including hope. That one made me laugh, even if it hurt. The worst part about hauling stone isn't the weight. It's the shifting. Every step you take, the load swings just enough to throw you off balance. Like a toddler yanking on your back with zero rhythm and all the vengeance. I'd barely recovered from the first drop-off before I was back at the quarry again. Knees clicking like cheap chopsticks. Fingers already blistering through the coarse twine of the shoulder strap. They said you build calluses fast on the wall. What they didn't say was how many layers of skin you'd shed before that happened. The quarry wasn't a mine, just a gash in the hillside, where men with arms like firewood hacked at granite with iron tools and grunted like oxen. Most of the cutting was already done for us. Our job was transport. One load after another, over loose gravel. Up and down steep dirt paths that were about as solid as an overcooked noodle. After my second run, I tried to rest my back against a boulder. Bad idea. A supervisor saw me. You want to become part of the wall, boy, he sneered. Spoiler, that wasn't a metaphor. I muttered an apology and stood back up, nearly toppling over from the shift in blood pressure. That's when my sandals gave out. The reed on the left one frayed, split wide, and sent a cold blast of rock into my bare foot. Great, just what I needed. A pebble lodged itself between two toes, and now every step felt like I was walking with a fang lodged in my skin. That as I tried to fix it, a guy next to me leaned over and whispered, "You can ask the old cook for a replacement. Just ... Don't mention last winter." Why? He gave me a haunted look. Let's just say he's still wearing the same boots, and they're not made of leather. I blinked. He winked. Was he joking? I hoped so. But there had been a story last night about a guard gone missing and a suspicious stew that tasted richer than usual. Anyway, but we returned to the mess station around mid-morning for what they generously called a break. I was given more of the grey porridge only. Now it had texture, crunchy texture. I didn't ask. Some questions are like cursed scrolls. You don't want to open them, said a voice beside me. A short, stocky guy with a face like a worn-out dumpling. Name's Liang. You knew? Yeah, I said. I'm just passing through, he snorted. Aren't we all? You a farmer or a criminal? Technically neither, I said. I stole a goat, sort of. More like borrowed it indefinitely. Liang grinned. Welcome to the borrowed goat department. Room for one more. Turns out, most of the men here had sort of crimes on their record. One guy just refused to pay taxes. Another accidentally insulted a magistrate's hat. One soldier supposedly joined a local opera because he liked the makeup, and that was apparently enough to get reassigned to rock-hauling duty. The Qin weren't known for their flexibility. Historically speaking, the workforce that built the early Great Wall, especially under Qin Shi Huang, included soldiers, peasants, criminals, and sometimes even scholars who annoyed the wrong people. It was basically the imperial version of go to jail. Go directly to jail, and also carry rocks for 10 hours a day. My stomach gurgled, not out of hunger, but protest. I'd eaten too fast, and probably a bug. Again, the sun was climbing now, and the ground was heating up. We didn't have wide hats like you see in movies. We had ragged cloth tied around our heads, dripping with sweat. It smelled like a battlefield made of armpits and bad decisions. By the fourth run, my feet were bleeding. No dramatics, just real, honest blood, soaking through straw. Keep going, Liang grunted beside me, carrying his load like he'd fused into it. Worst thing you can do is stop. I think my soul left 2 loads ago. Tell it to leave directions. We'll catch up after supper. We pushed forward. Here's a historical gem for you. The earliest sections of the wall were actually made of tamped earth, not stone. In the arid north, they'd fill wooden frames with dirt and pound it solid using giant poles like vertical logs used as hammers. Sometimes thousands of laborers would be assigned just to compress soil over and over until it felt like concrete. Then, when they had the money and manpower, they'd switch to bricks or stone. But not every wall section was created equal. Some parts crumbled centuries ago. Others still stand strong. You can always tell which parts were built by starving convicts versus proud imperial engineers. As for me, I was starting to hallucinate that my baskets were sentient. They mocked me in perfect harmony. Why are we heavy? Why are you weak? Maybe we're the strong ones now. It didn't help that I was dehydrated. The only water available was in a big communal jug that tasted vaguely like rust and goat, or maybe just the memory of goat. You never know on a war like this. The foreman finally let us pause after the 5th run. I slumped beside Liang, who was chewing on a root like it owed him money. What is that? I asked. Licorice root, helps with thirst and hallucinations. Any more? Nope. He chewed louder. The sun kept climbing. The mountains around us shimmered with heat. Somewhere down in the valley, I thought I saw caravan traders maybe, or inspectors, but it could have been mirage, or another hallucination. Still, we hauled. Still the wall grew. Still, no one dared say, I'm tired. You haven't known true betrayal until you've tried. Climbing a 70-degree slope with 100 pounds of stone on your back, and the ground decides mid-step to become sand. My 3rd run back up the ridge should have been muscle memory by now. But instead, it was just misery memory. Every muscle screamed in its own language. Knees, swearing in ancient Sumerian. Ankles, cursing my ancestors. Even my teeth ached for some reason, and they weren't even doing any of the carrying. This section of the path had been carved into a zigzag to reduce the incline, which was a nice theory except it meant more steps. And steps meant more shifting. Baskets, more pressure on my spine. And more temptation to just lie down and let gravity handle my responsibilities. Don't lean forward too much, Liang warned from behind. You'll pitch face first into the afterlife. Maybe that's the plan. He laughed and nearly dropped a stone that at one point, the straps of my carrying pole started to loosen. I paused to retie them. Big mistake. The guy behind me, who apparently wasn't a fan of personal space or sudden stops, bumped into me and sent a ripple through my whole frame. I nearly tumbled backward, catching myself on a crooked tree root sticking out of the dirt. The foreman up top saw it happen, and bellowed, "No resting. You rest, you rot." So poetic. I grunted and kept moving. We passed 2 guys on their way down, both ghost pale and dragging their baskets empty behind them. One was limping, the other had a nosebleed that painted a trail down his shirt. I didn't ask questions. Wall etiquette, rule number 1. Don't stare at other people's suffering. You'll have plenty of your own soon enough. Halfway up, there was a small plateau, a flat outcrop that served as a kind of unofficial breathing station. I dropped my load for 10 seconds, no more, or the rock would dig its little memory into my shoulders again. I stretched my arms. My joints sounded like bamboo wind chimes in a thunderstorm. That's when I noticed the view. The Great Wall at least. The little fraction we'd built so far snaked off across the ridgeline like a scar across the earth. Behind it, layer after layer of dusty hills rose into the haze, vanishing into a fog so faint it looked like the mountains were exhaling. For a moment, it didn't look like a prison. It looked like a dragon's spine, ancient, endless, powerful. "I'll say one thing," Liang said, as he joined me on the plateau, wheezing. "We're building the ugliest miracle in history." Ugly. Well, yeah. It's not exactly delicate. It's angry stone. I couldn't argue. He looked out at the wall. You know it's going to be over 20,000 li long. How long is that in modern? Too long. He wasn't wrong. That's about 13,000 miles. Of course not. All at once, different dynasties added their own sections. But we didn't know that. All we knew was we were adding to something massive. One miserable rock at a time. A weird breeze rolled in, dry and sudden, full of grit. It scraped across my face and into my mouth. Tasted like sanded garlic. I think the mountain's chewing us back, I muttered. You ever notice, Liang said between hacks, how every meal, every breath, every blink tastes like this place? Maybe we're becoming part of it. Oh good, he deadpanned. I always wanted to be a human brick. As we hoisted our baskets again and started the final leg of the climb, I heard someone down below yell. Then a thud. Then silence. We didn't stop to look. Again wall etiquette. Whatever happened would either resolve itself or be buried. Literally, we reached the top, just as the sun hit its brutal midday positions straight up. No shade, pure judgment. Up here, the builders were laying the actual stones into the foundation. The method was weirdly satisfying to watch. You'd have a base layer of flat stone, then mortar sort of. It was more like a thick paste made from lime, sticky clay, and sometimes sticky rice. Yes, rice. Apparently, the starch helped strengthen the mix. A few modern archaeologists still argue about whether rice was used in all sections or just some. Either way, the effect was kind of genius. They'd slap on the mortar, then place the next stone, tap it down with wooden mallets, and shim it into place. Repeat, 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 until your soul gave up. The foreman pointed to my basket. Unload near the western slope. I staggered over and tipped the stones out with a grunt. They landed with hard, echoing thuds. It was like dropping pieces of yourself onto the earth. I caught a glimpse of one of the engineers, an actual official from the capital, with clean robes and a scroll in hand. He was measuring angles, muttering to himself. Didn't even look at the workers. Probably hadn't sweated in years. You think they'll remember us? I asked Liang as we watched the foreman yell at a guy for laying a stone slightly crooked. Nope, not even a name on a tablet. They'll remember the wall, he said. Not who built it. Dark truth. Another quirky fact for you. Some historians believe the workers carved hidden messages or their names into the stones, knowing full well no one would ever read them. Little acts of rebellion written in granite. Maybe someone would stumble on them 1,000 years later, or maybe not. Maybe they'd just fade into dust with the rest of us. After the unload, we were told to help with tamping earth. 4 sections, not made of stone. They'd layer dirt into wooden molds and then use big poles like upright battering rams to pound it into concrete density. You'd need 20 men on each pole, lifting and slamming in rhythm. It was like angry dancing. For dirt dot, by the time we were done, I could barely lift my arms. We trudged back down the slope for another load, and I swear the path had grown longer, or maybe my body had just shrunk from the inside out. Liang tapped me on the shoulder. You know what the emperor said about this wall? I groaned. Let me guess. Make it high and never pay overtime. Nope, he said. This wall will make China eternal. I looked around. Sweat, pain, blood, dust. Eternal, huh? I guess immortality hurts, I muttered. You're not wrong. You know what's worse than carrying stones up a cliff all day? Realizing you're not even special for it. I mean, it's not like I'm the only one doing it. Everyone here is as broken, sunburnt, and underfed as I am, some even more. That was the part I really started noticing after a few hours. The faces, dozens of them, each with a story they weren't allowed to tell. There was Lao Zhong, whose back was bent like a willow branch from years of rice farming until he couldn't pay his taxes and ended up on the wall. There was Buk Yang, turned prisoner after deserting during a minor border skirmish. Said he just got tired of stabbing people for emperors who didn't even know his name. And there was Wulyu, who barely spoke but carved tiny animals into broken tiles during breaks, little dragons and cranes, always with such gentle detail it felt like he was remembering something he'd lost. It's strange. You sweat next to a guy for 6 hours, barely talk, and still feel like you know him better than your own brother. Mid-afternoon I sat for a moment beside one of the few small trees on the ridge, a gnarled little thing with leaves like flattened needles. It was the closest thing we had to shade. 2 others joined me, a wiry teen whose name I didn't know, and a man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a quiet presence. We used to call this Sparrow's Cliff, the older man said. Before they flattened it. What was it for? I asked. Nothing. It was just pretty. There were flowers here. Blue ones. I don't remember the name. I stared at the packed dirt beneath our feet. Nothing but dust now. No birds. Number blue. Just brown. Brown. More brown. And the occasional red when someone bled into it. They say the wall will keep out the Zhongnu. The teenager piped up. But will it keep us in? The older man didn't answer. That historically, one of the key motivations for building sections of the Great Wall was to fend off northern nomadic tribes, especially the Zhongnu, who raided and traded depending on the season. But here's the kicker. Historians still debate how effective it actually was. Some say the wall was more psychological than military reflex. Others think it served more as a customs checkpoint and communication relay than a battlefield barrier. But none of that mattered to us. We weren't in strategy meetings. We were just the mortar. Later that day, I ended up on crew duty with a man named Deng. Big guy, big beard, big laugh. He hauled bricks like they were nothing, and he swore more creatively than anyone I'd ever met. You know why I'm here? He grunted, stacking bricks into neat rows. Let me guess. Tax fraud. Close. I punched a noble's horse. The horse. Yeah, thing bit me. I reacted. Apparently, the horse was considered a member of the family. I laughed so hard, I dropped a brick. Deng didn't smile. not a joke. 2 years labor for punching a horse. Yikes. He leaned in. Best part, the horse kicked me first. Classic. By the 5th trip up the slope, my brain had started separating from my body. I was walking, breathing, moving, but none of it felt real. Like I was watching myself in someone else's nightmare. Someone screamed behind us, probably slipped. Then another shouted for help. No one ran over. A group moved slowly, carefully, like ants gathering round a dropped breadcrumb. The foreman didn't even look that guy, Deng said flatly. That's his 3rd fall this week. He won't last another. And just like that, it was back to bricks. I realized something strange around this point. I hadn't heard anyone laugh, like really laugh, all day except for Deng. The air was too thin for joy. And yet, weirdly, people still cracked jokes. Little ones, quiet ones. Liang whispered that the foreman's face looked like a sack of wet flour. Someone else compared our meals to boiled despair. They weren't loud about it, just enough to remind each other, hey, we're still here. There's this human instinct to make light of darkness, even if the only audience is someone who might be dead by morning. Let me tell you a secret, Deng said as we finished a row of stones. This wall, it's not for defense. It's punishment shaped like architecture deep. And if that doesn't work, they'll build another one, with more stairs. Honestly, that might have been the scariest thing I'd heard all day. We rotated tasks by early evening. Instead of carrying, I was moved to tamping duty. My job was to hold a vertical pole the size of a tree trunk and slam it over and over into loose dirt to compact it. It was like doing a bicep workout with a giant's toothpick. The rhythm got weirdly hypnotic after a while. Lift, slam, thud, repeat. My hands blistered more. My brain fuzzed out. At one point, someone near me fainted. Not from injury, just heat and exhaustion. He crumpled like a sack of cloth. 2 others carried him off. I didn't see him again that day, or ever. You learn not to ask. One quirky fact that got passed around during our slamming session. Some people back home thought the wall was so long you could walk from one end to the other in a single year, walking non-stop. No sleep, just walking. Deng looked up and muttered, I'd settle for walking back to my village in less than a month. A beat passed, assuming I ever get out of here. We tamped on in silence. I looked up just as the sun dipped low enough to stain the sky in smudges of orange and bruised purple. It made the wall glow like it had its own heartbeat. And then the bell rang, the "You're not dead yet" bell. Time for evening cleanup. We staggered off the ridge one last time, tools slung over sore shoulders, baskets left in rows. The wind had died down, dust settled, and for once, no one spoke, just breathing, just existing, a day like any other. If you survived it. The sun was sinking, and it felt like the earth was finally exhaling after holding its breath all day. Everything turned the color of rust stone, sky, sweat-soaked shirts. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it just meant we still had work left in the dying light. As we marched down the slope, one of the new guys behind me tripped and fell face first into the dirt. He didn't move right away. For a second, I thought he might have passed out. The foreman didn't even blink. If you can groan, you can stand. And sure enough, the guy groaned, pushed up on one elbow, and got to his knees. His nose was bleeding. Someone handed him a strip of cloth. Not clean, nothing out here was clean, but still, it was help. That was how compassion worked here, small and quiet. Nothing you could get in trouble for. I hobbled into the supply tent to return the carrying pole. My palms were raw and stung, like they'd been kissed by fire ants. No one cared. There was no inspection, no encouragement, just a grunt from the tent keeper and a nod to the stack of poles for tomorrow. Behind the supply tent, I spotted an older man with a rag tied around his head, crouched over a flat rock, holding what looked like a tiny chisel. He was carving something into a brick that hadn't yet been set into the wall. I paused. What are you doing? He didn't look up. Putting my name where no one can erase it. Why? Because when I die, at least one thing will know. I was here. It hit harder than I expected. Not the drama of it, but the simplicity. Just a name etched deep enough to outlast the skin, the bones. The rumor of a life. Historically speaking, very few records exist of the actual workers who built the Great Wall. Their names were never carved on imperial plaques. Their stories didn't make it into scrolls. In many ways they were considered expendable, replaceable, dust that held up stone. Dinner that night was Let's just say consistent. Gruel again. Possibly warmer this time. Possibly not. Liang swore he tasted onion. No way, Deng replied. You just bit your tongue. I slurped mine in silence, chewing on what might have been a mushroom or might have been a button. The kitchen didn't keep track. We sat around a dying fire. It wasn't for warmth, it barely gave off heat. It was just something to look at that wasn't grey walls or grey food or grey sky. That's the thing about working 12 hours straight. By the time you sit, you feel like you've aged 5 years. A guy named Mu sat across from me, sharpening a little blade with a stone the size of his thumb. He had tattoos across his forearm screwed, fading symbols that looked like waves and tigers. Maybe from a tribe further south. Maybe prison ink. He never said. You hear about the guy who dropped a stone on his own foot? He asked. No. I said. Did it break the foot? No. The stone. We all groaned in unison. You're banned from talking, Deng muttered. For a week, even jokes became currency out here. You traded one to buy a moment of forgetfulness. A smile was worth more than a meal, and a good pun could be forgiven, even if it made you cry inside. The light faded completely, and that's when the cold really crept in, like invisible water soaking into your bones. There was no insulation in our tents, just tightly packed bodies under shared blankets that smelled like old smoke and regret. We took turns sleeping near the edges, where the wind came through the seams. I lay down with a sigh. My body screamed, but my mind was still wired. That happened a lot. Too tired to move, too sore to sleep. Somewhere outside, I heard laughter. Real, soft laughter, the kind you try to hide. I peeked out and saw a small group near the shadows of the eastern ridge. They were sitting in a circle, passing something around. Not food, a small clay flask. Rice wine. Liang appeared beside me like a ghost. Wanna see if they'll share. I thought drinking was banned. Everything's banned, except pain. We tiptoed through the camp like teens, sneaking out for a party which in a way, we were just a party where no one danced and half the people had scurvy. The man holding the flask was short, with sunken eyes and a blackened fingernail. He passed it to Liang without a word. Then to me. It burned like regret, but tasted like rebellion. Real wine, probably brewed in a hidden jug using stolen rice and boiled down in secret. It wasn't good, it was alive. It woke up parts of me that had gone numb. That we passed it around once more. No one talked politics. No one said anything profound. It was just silence and sips, and a little humming from someone who might have once played a lute in another life. Deng leaned over and muttered, "You know why they hum? Because we don't have instruments." No, because the wall can't hum back. It can echo, but it can't hum. That's why songs are ours. They don't belong to the emperor. I didn't reply. I just sat there and listened. The stars came out, big, bright, indifferent. The Milky Way was visible like a wound stitched across the sky. It was the one thing no one could build over. Back in my tent, curled beside Liang and Deng under a shared wool sheet, I finally felt something I hadn't felt all day. Stillness, just before sleep, claimed me. I had a weird thought. What if the wall isn't for defense? What if it's a mirror? A way for us to look at what we're willing to die for, even when we never agreed to it in the first place. But sleep swept that thought away before it could settle. Like the wind, like everything else. By the time the sun started creeping up again, I already hated it. The light was too bright, too honest, like it was checking to see who'd made it through the night. A few guys didn't. One died in his sleep-old heart, or maybe he just finally gave up. The other never came back from latrine duty. They said wolves got him, or maybe he ran. Same thing. In the end, no one talked much during morning gruel. Not even Deng. The mood was brittle. Everything felt heavy, like even the air was tired. The foreman handed out assignments with all the warmth of a rock slide. I got waved toward the west tower, where they were laying the base of a new segment. No more hauling. Today, I was learning how to build. Wall building 101, Deng said, clapping me on the back like he hadn't also just woken up in a frozen tent with 7 other guys and a weird smell that none of us had claimed at the tower site. The work was slower, more precise. Stones had to be aligned just right. Too much tilt, and the whole thing would buckle. The base stones were massive, at least 2 feet long, shaped like rough bricks. We used wedges and ropes to move them, not because it was efficient, but because we didn't have animals to help. No oxen up here. Just us, with our sore backs and prayer-level optimism. "Line it up," barked a supervisor. "Use the level." We had a level, an actual wooden tool with a floating bubble in oil. Pretty high-tech for the time. Most workers never got to touch it, but I lucked out. Or maybe they wanted someone else to blame if things went crooked. I knelt beside the edge, adjusted the stone with a pry bar, and peered at the bubble. "Too far left. Tap it," Liang said, gently. Define gently, like how you'd poke a sleeping snake. "Great." So with fear and regret, I tapped. The stone shifted, bubble-centered. "Good," he nodded. "Now 10,000 more." That's the part they don't tell you about the wall. It's all about layers. First the foundation, then bricks or stones stacked in rows, with mortar in between, then tamping, then repeat, layer after layer, like the Earth's crust, except it's built by starving people with questionable hygiene. We used a thick, sticky paste as mortar. It looked like grey peanut butter, but smelled like crushed limestone and wet socks. Sticky rice was in there too. No joke, archaeologists have confirmed that some parts of the Mingira wall used a blend of lime and glutinous rice paste. Apparently, it made the wall earthquake resistant. "Don't eat the mortar," Deng warned, watching me scrape it from my hand. I wasn't going to. Just saying. "You look hungry." Touché. We used wooden trowels to smear the mortar, then slid the next brick into place. The foreman checked every third stone. If it rocked or wobbled, he'd toss it over the edge and scream at the layer team. "You'd think this'll still be here in 1,000 years?" I asked Liang as we worked. He didn't even glance up. I hope I'm not. Fair still, part of me kind of wanted it to last. I'd like to believe that if you bleed for something, it should at least stick around long enough for your bones to forget. Mid-morning, we paused to let an engineering official do an inspection. He was thin, with ink-stained sleeves and a nose that looked like it judged people for a living. He didn't speak to us directly, just nodded, jotted something on a scroll, and moved on. "Why is he even here?" someone muttered, to remind us we're not in charge of anything, not even our mistakes. We got back to it. Mortar, stone, tap, level, repeat. There's something weirdly meditative about it. Not peaceful, just numb. Your brain detaches. You stop thinking in full sentences. It becomes sound and motion. Slosh, thud, scrape, like a rhythm you didn't choose but now can't unhear. Then someone dropped a brick. It wasn't just a little fumble, it was a full slow-motion catastrophe. The guy, young, twitchy, from the south by his accent, was handing a block up to the next platform. His grip slipped. It fell. Time slowed. We all watched it hit the edge of the wall, bounce, and plummet over the side. There was a thud, far below, then silence. Everyone froze. The foreman rushed over, eyes blazing. The worker held up both hands, terrified. I didn't mean the foreman slapped him. Hard. That's one less brick, and maybe one less life. What if there was someone down there? He pointed toward the edge, then back at the trembling worker. "If you drop another, you're going over next." It wasn't an idle threat. There were stories of men being executed for sabotaging imperial property, even accidentally. The wall was sacred. Our lives, not so much. After that, nobody talked for an hour. Even Deng was quiet, though he did mutter something about wishing for a brick made of tofu. By late afternoon, I was back on the lower platform, lifting bricks from a sled, dragged by 3 guys with shoulders like tree trunks. The sled skidded across logs, which we repositioned every few feet. It was slow, awkward work, but still easier than backdash carrying. My palms were starting to split open. Every lift burned. I had little crescent-shaped cuts from where the mortar stuck and dried like glue. I rubbed one with spit. "Bad idea. Pain's a good sign," Liang said. "Means you're still here. Remind me to slap you when I stop being grateful for that." As the sun began to slide westward, a distant shout made everyone freeze. "Bandits," someone hissed, but no, just more supply haulers. Still, the word bandit had weight. Rumors had been spreading for weeks that nomads were raiding work, camps not to steal, but to send a message, that the wall was an insult, that it wouldn't stop them. Truth be told, we weren't even sure where we were exactly. Somewhere north of Yanmen Pass, probably. The empire stretched so far it felt like we were building the edge of a map, drawn by someone with shaky hands and bad intentions. As we laid the last bricks for the day's quota, Deng looked at me and grunted. "Well, if this wall doesn't stop invaders, maybe it'll at least give them splinters." You ever wonder if we're building a wall to keep us in? He didn't laugh. Neither did I. There's nothing like the sound of stone crashing to earth from 40 feet up to remind you how squishy the human body is. Late afternoon turned wild fast. We were laying more base stones on the western segment when the upper platform crew shouted, "Something too late." A chunk of wall hastily laid the day before gave way like a rotten tooth. Bricks tumbled, mortar split like bad pudding, and then wham, one of the cornerstones slid off and dropped straight down the slope. Nobody was beneath it. Thank the ancestors, but it was close, real close. A guy named G, barely old enough to shave, had just moved from that exact spot to chase a runaway chisel. If he hadn't, well, let's just say that cornerstone would have ended up wearing his shoes. That's what happens when you lay crooked. The foreman bellowed like the thunder god himself. His face turned PUCE, but we all stood still. He never wanted to be the one holding anything when something like that happened. That's how blame traveled here like lightning, straight down to whoever had the worst luck. What happened? I whispered to Deng, who was wiping sweat from his forehead with a strip of his shirt. Too fast, too sloppy, he muttered. We're over quota this week. The supervisors are pushing speed over safety. Bad combo. Historically accurate. While parts of the wall were meticulously planned and engineered, many stretches were thrown up quickly, especially when the Emperor's men threatened punishment for delays. Corners were cut, sometimes literally, and structural integrity was a suggestion, not a rule. The wall might have been the longest graveyard in the world. After the mess, we were ordered to reinforce the loose section. That meant digging out chunks of brick and mortar and stacking new bricks. Problem was, the pile of new bricks was mostly reused rubble. Some were chipped, others slick with old dust that wouldn't hold mortar. It was like trying to build a palace out of stale bread and spit dot. To top it off, my right wrist had started to throb. I wasn't sure if it was sprained or just staging a quiet protest against the idea of labor. Every time I lifted, it twinged GED. Deng noticed. "Wanna switch jobs? I'll do brick, you do mortar. You just want to avoid the heavy lifting." "Correct." We swapped. I dipped the wooden trowel into a half-empty bucket of lime rice mortar and began spreading. The texture was gritty, like mixing oatmeal with sand and sadness. It stuck to everything, especially my skin, probably exfoliating or poisoning. Either way, you ever notice how quiet it gets after an accident? I asked, as I smeared the mortar onto a new base stone. Liang, passing by, nodded. Fear silences faster than hunger. He wasn't wrong. After the crash, people barely spoke above whispers. The whole site had an eerie tension, like we were waiting for something else to break. Then came the second scare of the day. A shadow passed overhead, big, fast. I instinctively ducked, even though there was nothing to duck from, just a large bird, probably a hawk or an eagle. It circled once and vanished behind the cliffs. "Messenger bird," someone said. "Or an omen. Depends who sent it," muttered another. Turns out birds were often used to carry messages between sites, rolled up, scrolls tied to their legs. Smart, when you consider how long it took a person to walk anywhere. Some birds even got trained to fly between specific wall outposts. Still, the way that shadow moved, it felt like a warning. I shook it off. We finished the repair job just before sundown. My wrist ached so badly I could barely squeeze my fingers shut. Deng offered me his leftover root scrap, some kind of medicinal herb he claimed helped with swelling. Tastes like despair. Everything out here does. I chewed it anyway. As we trudged back to camp, I passed by the spot where the cornerstone had landed. It had split clean in two. Beside it, someone had scratched a line into the dirt. "The wall takes, the wall remembers." I didn't know who wrote it. Maybe no one. Maybe the wind. But I believed it. Dinner was quieter than usual. Even Deng barely managed a joke hand when he did. It was about how the porridge had improved because someone probably dropped a shoe in it. Nobody laughed. Afterward, I walked alone for a bit, needing to clear the noise out of my head. The moon was rising, big and yellow like a bruised lantern. The wall glowed faintly in its light, casting jagged shadows like broken teeth. From a distance, it looked invincible. Up close, it looked like panic held together with sweat. And yet, it was still standing. One of the guards on the tower noticed me staring. First time seeing it at night. First time seeing it like this. He nodded. "You know they say ghosts walk the wall after dark, because they died building it." "No," he said, his voice low. "Because they were forgotten after." That one stayed with me. There's an open academic debate on whether the wall truly served its function, or whether it were more symbolic, meant to intimidate and define borders. But to those of us down here, it didn't matter. It was a place of work, of death, of effort that might never be acknowledged. And for some of us, it was the only mark we'd ever leave on the world. That night, I lay on my mat, staring at the inside of the tent and listening to the wind whistle through the seams. My wrist throbbed, my shoulders burned, and my hands smelled like mortar. I wasn't sure if I was proud or just tired. Somewhere outside, a stone rolled down the slope and came to a stop. I didn't get up. If it was the wall shifting again, we'd deal with it tomorrow. Let me explain something about lunch on the wall. It's a lie. Okay, not entirely. There is a meal, usually somewhere between when the sun is cooking your spine and when your sweat has turned to salt crust. But calling it a break is like calling a slap on the head a massage. It's a momentary pause in the suffering, followed by the realization that, yep, it's still today, and yep, you still have bricks to move. That morning had been worse than most. We'd started early, trying to meet a new quota announced by a man, on horseback with a scroll and a face like boiled cabbage. Emperor demands progress, he said. Faster, higher, stronger. Sounds like a motto for an athletic competition, right? Except we weren't throwing javelins, we were throwing our sanity off a cliff. By the time the midday gong rang, I was seeing spots, not metaphorical ones, actual spots. Red, black, swirly little dancers parading across my vision like, hey, wanna faint today? I found a sliver of shade behind a tool cart and dropped down, legs cramping, fingers twitching. Liang was already there, chewing his gruel slowly like he was negotiating with it. Today's flavor, I asked. He sniffed it. Resentment, with a dash of ground-up disappointment. I dipped 2 fingers into my bowl still, no spoons, and shoveled it in. It was warm. That was the only compliment I could give it. Warm and mostly solid. I crunched something. Bone, I asked. Twig, if you're lucky. Across the path, someone gagged. Yeah, classic lunchtime. Quirky side note. The gruel we ate was probably made from millet, the go-to grain in ancient China. Easy to grow, filling, and capable of absorbing absolutely zero flavor. It had the consistency of glue and the taste of regret, but it kept you moving. Barely. Overhead, the sun was brutal. No clouds, no mercy. The dirt gave off heat like an oven tray, and if you stood in one place too long, your sandals would start to smell like baked reeds. Deng arrived, sat down heavily, and chugged a full ladle of water. Don't do that, Liang warned. You'll cramp. Worth it, Deng wheezed. I think I just sneezed blood. I handed him a slice of dried root from my stash. Bitter, sour, awful but good for recovery. Think the emperor eats this stuff? I asked. He eats on tables made of jade, probably. Served by dancers in silk. And here we are, swatting flies with brick dust and drinking rusted soup. Deng shrugged. Hey, at least we're not being executed for building it wrong. Yet, the rest period was 30 minutes. That's it. Enough time to chew, drink, and wonder why you didn't fake a limp that morning. A guy tried it yesterday, smeared mud on his ankle, limped dramatically, made sad eyes. The foreman made him run laps with a stone on his back. He hasn't limped since today. The moment the gong rang again, we were back up, tools in hand, baskets reloaded, joints stiff, muscles tight, brains quietly screaming. And then, just as I picked up my load again, I heard something, a rumble, low, rolling. At first, I thought it was an earthquake. Maybe the gods had finally decided to send the whole wall crashing down like, okay, this has gone far enough. But no, it was hooves, not many, just a few, coming down the path from the east. Fast. We turned. 3 riders approached, dust flying up behind them. One wore a red Sashimpyo aerial courier. The others were soldiers, armed, alert, not smiling. Everyone stood still, because this meant one of 3 things. Someone important was coming. Someone important was dead. New orders were about to ruin our week. It was number 3. The courier dismounted and unrolled a scroll with exaggerated flair. He cleared his throat. By order of the Imperial Ministry of Works, he began, and we all groaned internally. This section shall double its weekly output for the remainder of the month. To compensate for delays at Section 13G Failure 2, meet targets shall result in full labor penalties. What's a labor penalty? A new guy whispered. Extra work, Liang muttered. Or lashes, or fewer rations, Deng added. Or all of the above. No one cheered. No one moved. The courier nodded once, remounted, and rode off like a man who had never lifted a single stone in his life. Just like that, lunch was officially over. We dragged ourselves back into motion. Double output meant double loads. No extra hands. No extra food. Just more. Everything. Everything. And here's the kicker. No one even protested. Why? Because it wouldn't matter. You shout too loud, and you get reassigned to punishment wall, where they make you tamp earth with your hands. We'd heard the story as I shuffled back up the slope with my baskets cutting into my shoulders like piano wire. At one point, I looked down and realized my hands were shaking so bad the mortar was sloshing out of the bucket. Drink this, Liang said, handing me a leaf rolled into a cup with a bitter herbal mix inside. Trust me, it's disgusting, but it helps. It was disgusting. Tasted like foot sweat and tree bark. But my shaking slowed. We worked until the sun started to dip, pushing ourselves beyond anything reasonable. My body stopped asking for rest. It just assumed it would never get any. There's a kind of numbness that sets in when you're this tired, not just in your limbs but in your hope. Like you know the wall won't be finished, not in your lifetime, maybe not ever. And yet you build, stone by stone, layer by layer, because what else is there? At one point, I dropped a bucket and didn't even feel bad. The supervisor yelled, but it sounded like he was underwater. I nodded, picked it up again, and kept going. By the time we got our final break, 15 minutes before sundown, I sat down and couldn't remember how I got there. Liang sat beside me, groaning. You know the funny thing, he said. When I first got here, I thought I'd find some meaning in all this. And now I just hope I don't become mortar. Too soon, I replied, eyes half shut. Too true, he whispered. A crow cawed overhead, sharp and loud like a nail in a coffin. Somewhere behind us, a gong rang again. Time to move. You ever seen a work crew suddenly pretend they're not dying? That's exactly what happened the moment the horns sounded. Not a musical kind of horn, mind you, more like someone shoving a cow's bladder into a bamboo pipe and blowing with vengeance. 3 short blasts. We all froze. Imperial inspectors, someone whispered. Immediately. Everyone sat up straighter. Tools were lifted with more purpose. Baskets were carried with extra care. Even the guy with the lopsided eye stopped limping. The camp transformed like magic, or, more accurately, like survival instinct kicking in. Within minutes, we were all aligned on the work ridge, backs taut, shirts hastily straightened. Deng muttered, "Smile, lads. Time to pretend the wall builds itself with joy and rice cakes." I forced a grin that probably looked like I had a hernia. Down the slope they came 4 riders in lacquered armor, glinting gold and red in the low sun. Their horses looked cleaner than we did. One of the inspectors even wore perfume. I could smell it through the dust. Jasmine, maybe, or the scent of authority. They dismounted with practiced ease, all flowing sleeves and deliberate steps. The leader, a tall man with a goatee and scroll tube strapped to his back, barely glanced at us before pacing toward the construction. "This the new Western Ridge segment?" he asked, his voice nasal and unimpressed. "Yes, Excellency," barked the foreman, bowing so low he might have kissed gravel. The inspector ran a long, polished fingernail along a fresh mortar joint. He scraped it and examined the residue. "Weak, you watered this down." "No, Excellency." The foreman squeaked. "The lime was pure, and the rice, I can smell it." The inspector said. We all held our breath. Historically, inspectors had terrifying power. They could dock rations, punish laborers, or worse, order executions for imperial sabotage. Some were fair, most weren't. Some were failed scholars who found satisfaction in wielding the whip instead of the brush. This guy seemed extra. He strolled along the wall, tapping stones with his knuckle, commenting as though he were judging a dumpling contest. "This one's chipped. This line's uneven. This shadow offends me." "Okay, I made that last one up, but it felt real." He stopped suddenly in front of Liang, who was mid-carry with a half-load of brick. Liang bowed awkwardly, knees wobbling. "What's your name?" the inspector asked. "Liang, Your Excellency." "And how many bricks have you moved today?" Liang blinked. 40. Maybe 50. "Wrong answer," the inspector snapped. "You should know exactly how many. Discipline begins with counting." He moved on. Liang exhaled. I count in screams. He whispered to me. It wasn't just a joke. It was survival math. The inspector eventually reached a small wooden shrine. Someone had quietly built into the wall a tribute to the ancestors. Just a carved stone tablet and 2 sticks of incense. We all stopped what we were doing, just for a moment, to see what he'd do. He stared at it, then with one quick flick of his hand, knocked the incense into the dirt. No superstition on the Emperor's wall, he said. Only structure, only strength. Deng's jaw tightened. I saw it, but he said nothing. Neither did anyone else. The wall was sacred to the Empire, but we needed our own small sacred things. A prayer, a carved name, a whispered song. Without them, we were just moving parts, that as the inspectors finished their rounds. The foreman offered terrible, bitter stuff, made from the same leaves we used to clean tools. But the inspectors accepted it, like it was a royal banquet. Your progress is adequate, the lead inspector said at last. Barely we all exhaled at the same time. They mounted up. The horses pranced a little, as if they knew they didn't belong here, and then they were gone, just like that. Dust in the wind, silence returned. Back to work. The foreman barked, voice laced with new panic, double effort. We're behind again. Everyone groaned, quietly, like ghosts being stepped on. Dong looked at me. You ever notice how no one inspects them? I nodded. Imperial math. Our blood, their credit. We resumed, lifting, stacking, mortaring. It was like the inspector's shadow lingered. Watching with invisible disapproval, my hands felt like hot sandbags tied to splinters. I could barely close them. My shirt was stiff with sweat and lime. My back itched in places I couldn't reach, and my thighs burned like I'd strapped hot bricks to each leg. But we kept moving. That's the thing about the wall. It's not just the stones that get layered. It's the silence, the pain, the little lies we tell ourselves to keep going. This section will last forever. Deng muttered, until the next quake. Liang replied, or the next emperor decides this one isn't thick enough. It was true. Some dynasties tore down old sections just to rebuild thicker ones. There's even debate among historians whether certain areas were deliberately dismantled for reuse elsewhere. You could spend years building something and then see it unbuilt in a week. The sun dropped lower. Orange turned to red. Bricks cast long, tired shadows. As we finished our final load, Liang looked over his shoulder and muttered, "Do you think he meant it?" Who? The inspector. That superstition has no place here. I looked at the place where the incense had been. He meant it, but he doesn't understand it. That's why he inspects, not builds. We both nodded. The distinction felt like armor. That night, I found a new name carved into the fresh mortar near the wall's base. Just 3 characters, barely visible. Probably from the guy who dropped that incense. I didn't say anything, but I whispered his name once under my breath, just in case the wall really does remember. There were rumors, always rumors. Bandits near the northern pass. Whole outpost burned down. Foreman at Camp 6G lost his head, literally. Most of the time it was just talk. Dustborn stories passed between bowls of gruel and shared misery, but this time the whispers carried weight. You could feel it, the way the guards doubled their patrols, the way the foreman suddenly started locking the tool shed at night. Even the kitchen fires were doused earlier than usual. Liang leaned in as we dragged bricks at dusk. You hear it. Hear what? He jerked his head toward the tree line. Something's out there. Not wolves. I paused, listening. The usual wind, distant stones scraping, a low whistle of mountain air through the canyons. Then maybe I heard something else, a soft rustle. Too deliberate to be wind, too quiet to be human. Probably just a goat, I offered. Yeah, Liang nodded. A goat with a sword. That night, the guard tower didn't ring the usual 3 bells to signal lights out, just 2, and no one said a word about it. That's the thing about fear on the wall, it doesn't announce itself. It just sits there, heavy, silent, waiting. They gave us torches, real ones. Usually they hoarded the oil, but tonight they made an exception. We were told to keep one lit at every corner of the encampment, not because it helped us see, but because they wanted to be seen. What's the plan if we're attacked? I asked Deng. Same as the plan, if we're not. What's that? Keep building. Joking aside, there really was a plan, sort of. Every 10 men had one alarm. Theoretically, that meant we could form a defensive line. Practically, it meant you'd fight over who got the sharpened stick, while everyone else grabbed rocks and hoped out around midnight. I was assigned to second shift patrol. The torch was heavy and burned unevenly, dripping fire tears onto my already blistered knuckles. The spear they handed me was dull. The point looked more like a spoon than a weapon. My partner was a guy named Yao. Quiet, pale, moved like he was trying not to wake the earth. "Done this before?" I asked. He nodded. "Once. Bandits don't like cold, but they like fear." "Great, so we're dessert." We walked the wall in silence, passing the torch between us every 10 paces. The stones were still warm from the day's heat. The mortar gave off a weird chalky scent that clung to your tongue. Below us, shadows stretched into forever. "See anything?" Yao asked, voice low. "Nope, just thinking about my feet. They might have given up." He laughed softly. "Yeah, mine surrendered last week. I'm just dragging ghosts now." The night dragged. No attacks, no screams, just the occasional flutter of bat wings and the crunch of dry grass shifting in the wind. Eventually, we reached the far end of the new wall section. That's where we saw them Imperial signal fires, tiny flickers on the next mountain ridge, placed every 10 li or so. They were designed to carry messages across vast distances. One fire could alert the next, and the next, in a chain reaction across hundreds of miles. Tonight, the one 2 towers down was lit red. Yao froze. "That's not normal." Red meant trouble, urgent, enemy movement, or something worse. We waited, watching, but no signal came after it. Just one red fire, standing alone. "Should we report it?" Yao shook his head. "Already lit here. They know. If they want us dead, they'll let us know louder." Comforting. After our shift, we returned to the tent. Deng and Liang were asleep, snoring in tandem like 2 oxen stuck in a tunnel. I curled up next to my gear and tried to ignore the thudding in my chest. Sleep came slowly, then suddenly, but dreams were bad. I saw the wall stretching forever, but it wasn't made of stone. It was made of us. Bodies stacked into rows, eyes open, mouths closed. And walking on top of it was a man in a red robe, faceless, dragging a chain made of spoons and mortar trowels. He was laughing, or maybe screaming. I woke up gasping. The tent was cold, still dark. No wind outside. I heard something clink, not metal, stone. I grabbed my spear and slipped out, heart pounding. I wasn't alone. A few others were awake too, peeking from their tents. What was that? Someone whispered. Wall shifted. No, that was footsteps. We waited, but nothing came, just silence, louder than anything. Later in the morning we'd find a stone. Missing, not loose, gone. Just ... no longer there. No one knew how. No tools had been touched. No tracks. Just a single stone removed from the base of the wall. The foreman said it was nothing. Bad counting. Fix it and move on. But we didn't forget, and we didn't sleep much the next night. As the day began, we built anyway. Because that's what we did. Bandits or no bandits. Missing stones or haunted dreams. You haul, you stack, you survive. And somewhere inside that rhythm, you forget that none of this makes sense. That the wall isn't just built on the edge of an empire. It's built on the edge of reason. You'd think, after a day like yesterday, inspectors' bandit rumors, red signal fires, and a mysteriously missing brick, we'd get a break. Ha. Cute. We were up at dawn. Just like always, with no mention of the missing stone. As if the wall never forgets, but the foreman absolutely does, and it was hotter than usual. The sky was already pale blue by the time we took our first steps up the ridge, and the heat came early, aggressive and sticky. My shirt clung to me like betrayal. Even the wind had given up. No breeze, no relief, just the slow roast of another miserable morning. Our assignment, more bricklaying, specifically, lifting and setting bricks along a sloped section near the east ledge where the terrain dropped off sharply. No railing, no ropes, just you, your balance, and the knowledge that if you tripped, gravity would finish the job your foreman started. Try not to die, Deng said, clapping me on the back as he passed with a basket full of mortar. I shuffled along the ledge, placing stones in neat little rows while my heart held its breath. Each step was a negotiation with physics. I dropped a brick once, not over the edge, thankfully, just onto my foot. The pain was instant and electric. I yelped, hopped backward, and caught myself just before tipping too far over the slope. Liang, nearby, didn't even look up. "You're okay?" "Yeah," I grunted. just broke my will to live. Oh good, that grows back. As I kept working, my foot throbbed, but my arms kept moving. That's the wallway. Pain wasn't permission to stop, it was just another layer you had to build through. We were laying bricks over tamped earth, and this segment used a double-core construction method. Historically, some sections of the wall were built with stone on the outside and packed earth on the inside. It saved on material and made it possible to build faster across rough terrain. The theory was sound. The reality, if the tamping wasn't done right, the center would collapse over time. Think this'll hold? I asked the guy tamping beside me. He looked up, sweat pouring down his cheeks. Doesn't have to. Just has to look like it will until the inspector leaves. Bubble quotes fair. By midday, I was a walking salt lick. The sweat dried before it reached my skin, leaving white stains across my sleeves and neck. My tongue felt like an old boot, but we finally got a water break, barely a ladle per man, served from a cracked ceramic jug that smelled faintly of moss. Deng leaned in. Close your eyes, he whispered. Pretend it's rice wine. I sipped. Still moss. I poured the last of it over my head. It dried in seconds. Then came the scream. It echoed from the west side of the worksite, high, sharp, and ending suddenly. We all turned. A worker had fallen, slipped, most likely, while hauling brick along a crumbling edge. No safety net, no second chance. The foreman jogged up with 2 guards. We waited in eerie silence, watching the edge. He came back alone. No one saw anything, he barked. Get back to work. No ceremony, no moment of silence, just a missing name and another layer of wall to lay. This place chews people up, I muttered. And burps mortar, Liang added, his voice tight. A debate exists among scholars about just how many people died building the wall. Some estimates say hundreds of thousands over the centuries, but in the camps, no one estimated. We just noticed when a face didn't show up to breakfast, when a blanket was gone, when the snoring in your tent sounded one voice thinner. That's when we noticed. Later, I found a sliver of that fallen man's tool, his trowel, snapped in half. I buried it beside the ledge, quietly, just so there was something left of him. That didn't belong to the wall. The afternoon dragged. I kept laying bricks, but my hands were slower, heavier. I wasn't alone. Everyone seemed ... dimmed, like the sun had bleached not just the sky, but our spirit. Then someone started humming quietly, off-key, but ... There'd it was Wuluth, guy who carved tiny animals in broken tiles. He sat near the mortar pile, whittling what looked like a bird out of scrap wood. The song was one I hadn't heard before. Minor notes, drifting like incense. One by one we paused to listen. It only lasted a minute, but it felt longer, wider, like it stretched out between us like a thread, tying us together, even just for that breath of time. After that, we worked in silence, not the scared kind, the solemn kind. By evening, the ledge section was done. We packed up tools and hauled the empty baskets back down, feet dragging, hands raw. Just before dinner, I sat on a flat stone near the supply tent, watching the sky bleed into night. That's when Deng joined me, pulling something from his sleeve. Found this today, he said, handing it over. It was a coin, old, worn, smooth, probably dropped by someone long gone. Not valuable except that it existed. A thing that had made it. You keeping it? I asked. No, he said, giving it to you. Why? Because you still see things, like that broken trowel. Most of us stopped looking a long time ago. I didn't know what to say, so I pocketed the coin and nodded. We ate in silence, slept in silence. But that night, I dreamed again, not of falling, or ghosts, or missing stones. Just of that little wooden bird, perched on the edge of the wall, looking out over nothing. And for once, it wasn't terrifying, just ... still. Nights were supposed to be rest, but not tonight. Tonight, I was on the roster for Moon Patrol. That meant no sleep, no blanket, and just enough cold wind to make your teeth feel like they had opinions. It also meant getting handed a crooked spear and told to watch for shadows. Very specific. I was stationed with Deng and 2 others Yao from before, and a tall, bony guy named Wei who never blinked. I don't mean that figuratively. He just didn't blink. Ever. It made conversations with him feel like interviews with fate. We climbed up to the western tower just before midnight, lanterns swaying from long poles. The sky was clearer than I'd ever seen it. Millions of stars, laid out like forgotten silver coins. The Milky Way sliced across the heavens like the wall sliced across the earth. We stood at the edge of something ancient, both above and below. No, Deng said, leaning on his spear. If I weren't freezing, I'd call this romantic. Yao chuckled. Write it in a letter to your wife. She ran off with a potter, said his clay was softer than my heart. That's fair, I muttered. Deng flipped me off with 3 fingers. Somehow it felt affectionate. We walked the perimeter, checking for loose bricks and anything unusual. Honestly, it was mostly boredom with a side of leg cramps, but at least it gave us time to look at the wall, not just build it. From up here, it didn't feel like something human could have made. It curved into the horizon like a giant's belt, slashing through mountains, forests, rivers. In the pale light, it almost shimmered, and I had this strange feeling, not fear, not awe, just ... smallness. I swear, Wei said finally. Sometimes I think the wall is watching us back. We all turned. Wei wasn't a talker. If he said something, you listened. What do you mean? I asked. He nodded toward the corner tower. I see shapes there sometimes, at the edge. But when I look again, nothing. Yao scoffed. You sure it's not your imagination? Wei slowly turned to him and said flatly, my imagination died the day my brother didn't come back from the mines. Silence. Deng coughed. Okay, well, that's sufficiently creepy. We passed the tower in question 20 minutes later. I looked, of course I looked, and maybe I saw something. A flicker, a shadow, too slow to be wind and too tall to be a man. Or maybe it was my brain, trying to turn darkness into patterns. Humans are good at that. We turn 3 stones into a face and call it an omen. Still, I tightened my grip on the spear. We kept walking. At some point, Deng started humming again. Same song Wu Yu had hummed yesterday. That old tune with the drifting notes, like a lullaby for people who forgot what rest was. We all joined in, quietly. Even Wei. It was oddly comforting. Like we were carrying something heavier than bricks. No, and sharing the weight. After a while, we stopped at the northern point to take a short break. I sat on the edge with my feet dangling over the side, staring out into the black. That's when I saw it. A single torch, far off in the valley, moving slowly, then stopping, then another, then 2 more. They're signaling, I said. Yao came. Over where? I pointed there. See, he squinted. Could be traders, could be bandits. Wei added, could be worse. I didn't ask what worse meant, I just nodded. We didn't have a bell, not up here. Instead, we were told to light a red fire if we saw anything. So I grabbed the flask of dye oil and set a small flame in the corner pit. The smoke turned crimson as it rose. The signal was sent. Would it change anything? No idea. What it did do was wake the camp. By the time we returned to the tents, guards were already marching, and the foreman was barking orders like he was defending the Forbidden City himself. Double check your tools. Sleep with your shoes on. And if anyone sees a stranger, you wake the whole ridge. We crawled into our tent in silence. No one spoke of the lights again, but in the quiet, Deng leaned over and passed me a small, round pebble. What's this? Worry stone, he whispered. Old habit. When you can't sleep, hold it, rub it. Pretend it's not your spine that hurts, but the rocks. You're sentimental for a guy with a reputation for headbutting nobles, only the rude ones. I turned the pebble in my palm. It was smooth, cool, comforting. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come quickly. Instead, my thoughts circled, like the wall itself, long looping, without end. Was the wall protecting us, or was it just keeping us too busy to notice we needed protecting? And why did it feel like, more and more, we were the ones being kept out of some other life we might have had, far from bricks and mortar and ghosts? As my mind finally faded into dreams, I had a last fleeting image. The wall, endless, empty, and a voice distant and familiar whispering, you're not building a barrier, you're building a story no one will ever finish. When you wake up on the wall, you don't really wake up, you just return to being upright. It's like rising out of mud, everything slow, heavy, vaguely damp, and slightly disappointing. The tent was cold again. My fingers didn't want to move, and my shoulders were locked in a shape that said, please stop existing. Liang groaned beside me. I dreamed I was swimming. Was it nice? No, I was swimming in mortar. We stepped out into the morning, and something felt off. The air wasn't just cold, it was still, dead still. The kind of stillness that comes before something changes. Across the ridge, the walls stood tall but quiet. No shouting, no orders. Just the low crackle of morning fires and the soft shuffle of people pretending it was just another day. Then someone whispered. They found another one. That snapped me alert. I followed the whispers up the slope, toward the south scaffold. There, by a half-laid section of the foundation, was a figure, not a body just, a tunic, folded neatly, with sandals placed beside it, like someone had undressed before vanishing into the rocks. No blood, no note, just absence. And in the mortar beside it, another carving, not a name this time, a symbol, a spiral, endless, crude, but deliberate. Suicide. Deng murmured, double quotes no one's that neat before jumping. Ran off. Too clear. We didn't say it, but we all felt that this was weird. Even by wall standards, the foreman ordered the items burned. No trace. Superstition weakens the body, he barked. But we weren't just building a wall anymore. We were building stories, and this one stuck. That afternoon, I was assigned to the signal tower, rotation duty. Technically a break, but it just meant less hauling and more standing while holding flags in the sun. Signal towers were placed every few miles along the wall. The idea was simple: raise smoke or flags to pass messages across the empire. You could relay a warning over hundreds of kilometers in less than a day. Pretty genius, if you had enough people who weren't asleep or hallucinating. Today, I worked with Wei, still silent, still not blinking. You think the wall's haunted? I asked, half joking. He tilted his head. Not haunted, alive. Alive how? Built with death, fed by silence. It watches. I blinked. Right. Cool. Thanks for the nightmares. We stood watch. Nothing came. No travelers, no riders, no new orders. But then the sun began to shift, and so did something else. Shapes in the distance. Not people, not horses, just shifting shadows. Not moving toward us but around us, like we were being watched by something that didn't want to be seen. Just known, and it wasn't just me. Wei saw it too. He pointed just once toward a ridge opposite us. Nothing there, but his mouth tightened. That evening, back at camp, we didn't talk about it, but no one lingered near the edge. Everyone kept close. Fire pits burned hotter, more torches, fewer jokes. Later, I found Deng sharpening a stone. Not a knife, just a stone. When I asked why, he shrugged. I don't know. Feels like something's coming. What kind of something? He paused. Not bandits, not soldiers, just something old. That night, the fire circle was different. Not loud, not cheerful, but shared. We passed around a single piece of dried fruit like it was gold. Took turns holding it, biting tiny pieces. It was a plum, from someone's home. Still sweet. Reminds me of the orchard back near my village, Liang said. Reminds me of not dying. Deng added. Wei looked into the fire and said, you ever think the wall's not meant to keep anything out but to keep us in? We all went quiet, because honestly, lately, it felt like that. Like we were inside something vast. And closing, I went to sleep, clutching that worry stone Deng had given me, and sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up, not from noise, from lack of it. No wind. No fire crackle. Just hush. I stepped outside, barefoot on the cold dirt, and looked at the wall. It shimmered, just slightly, like heat waves, but it wasn't hot. And on the horizon on the farthest peak I saw something glowing. Not fire, not lightning. Just light, still quiet, watching. Then it was gone, like a blink, or like it had blinked at me. Morning came late, or maybe I just woke up early. Hard to tell anymore. Time on the wall isn't made of hours, it's made of bruises and blisters. I lay there, listening to the camp stir to life. The usual sounds, coughing, groaning, someone arguing over whose turn it was to scrape the burned bits from the pot. But beneath all that, something quieter, a sort of tension, like the whole place was holding its breath. And then my name. Get up. You're on watch today. Not a request, an order. I set up, again. Deng nodded, already half-geared with his spear. Foreman wants new eyes on the night route. He says we've had too many incidents. By incidents, he meant disappearances. That made 3 in 4 days, all from night watch. And now, lucky me, I got the graveyard shift. Literal. Maybe. After a quick breakfast, hot gruel with a beetle bonus protein, I reported to the tower with 3 others. Deng, Yao, and a woman named Suni. a new recruit from another camp. She was quiet, built like rope thin but coiled and had the eyes of someone who'd stopped expecting fairness a long time ago. We stood in silence at the edge of the tower, looking out over the endless ridge. The wind had picked up again. Not comforting wind, whistling wind, the kind that made you check your own shadow. Soon he broke the silence. I saw one of the vouchings. Guy walked off like he was sleepwalking. Just ... stepped down the slope. Never screamed, never looked back. You tried to stop him? Deng asked. I called out. He didn't even blink. Wei, who was already stationed there, joined us. That's the third one who walked like that. He paused. ... Fourth, if you count the guy who woke up screaming, but couldn't say why. Cool. Totally fine. Nothing eerie happening here. We rotated posts around the outer ridge. It wasn't the highest part of the wall, but it gave us a long view in all directions. To the north, jagged rocks. To the south, more wall. To the west, a drop so steep it looked like the earth had given up. My post was along the shadow line where the torches didn't quite reach. You know, the comfort zone. The spear felt heavier than usual. I gripped it anyway, trying not to remember how the last guy who held it disappeared without a sound. A few hours in, I heard the sound again, stone moving, but not falling, shifting. Stepped closer to the wall. Nothing looked different. Still firm, still tall, still ancient. And then I saw it, a handprint, fresh, in mortar that should have been dry for weeks. Backed up. I didn't shout, didn't run, just watched it. It didn't move, but I knew it hadn't been there before. I reported it to the captain, on watch. He took one look, muttered something about settling mortar, and told me to focus. Settling mortar doesn't leave 5 distinct fingers pressed inches deep. Still, I nodded, because what else could I say? That the wall was growing hands. That night, during the last patrol rotation, the wind shifted direction. It blew toward the wall, not from it. I felt it at my back, pushing me into the stones. And then, somewhere, in the valley, I heard music. Not flutes, not drums, a single note, like something plucked from a string made of glass and breath. Soft, clear, and ancient. Soon he heard it too. Her eyes widened. That's not a bird. No, I said. It's not. The note didn't repeat. It just was. Like a message, or a name, or a warning we didn't understand. Back to camp, the captain finally said, nothing more to see here. Except there always was. We returned in silence. As I passed the main tower, I noticed something new. A small pile of stones had been arranged in a spiral at the foot of the wall, just like the symbol we saw beside that folded tunic. Only now, 3 stones, high. I looked around. No one claimed it, and it hadn't been there at sunset. Still think this is all superstition? I asked Deng later. He didn't answer. He just handed me another pebble. Keep this one too for your other hand. That night, in the tent, the silence was thick. The kind of thick that makes even dreams feel muffled. I didn't sleep much. I kept feeling like someone or something was walking the ridge, not outside the wall, on it, in it, like we were laying bricks over bones that weren't quite done speaking. Historically, there are tales, mostly folklore, of spirits haunting the wall, souls who died during construction, workers buried alive, watchers cursed to never leave their posts. Academics wave them off, but if you asked any of us that week, we wouldn't wave anything off. We'd nod, hand you a pebble, and tell you not to whistle after dark, because the wall doesn't like to be disturbed at night, and sometimes it hums back. It started with firelight and a whisper, not a wind whisper person, someone muttering under their breath near the west tower, just loud enough for the sound to carry, just quiet enough that you didn't want to admit you heard it. I'd drawn late watch, again 3rd time this week. Either bad luck or someone had decided I looked extra ghost-proof. The fire in the brazier was dying. I leaned over to stoke it when I caught the voice. ... Still digging. ... Can't stop now. ... I froze. Behind me, empty scaffold. ... Above me, stone and stars. The sound stopped. I turned slowly. No one. Great. I walked back toward camp faster than I'd like to admit. Not running, because running means something's chasing you, but fast enough that if it was, it wouldn't have time to introduce itself. Back at the tent, I found Liang awake, sharpening his trowel like it was a blade. Night's loud again, he said, without looking up. You heard it too. Yet he paused. 3rd night in a row. That's when Deng sat up. "I've got a story," he said, voice hoarse from sleep and dust. "Heard it from a guy stationed 10 ridges west." We all leaned in. Back when they were building the chin sections, they say a crew was sent to lay foundation in a cursed ravine. Every day, the mortar cracked, bricks wouldn't hold. Accidents, deaths. One Gaisam say, a shaman said it, was angry land, that they had to feed it. "Feed it how?" I asked. He looked at me, steady with names. "Now, that had to be superstition, right? Folklore, wall ghost bedtime stories. But when you work 16 hours a day on a ridge, no one can pronounce, building a wall no one will finish, and you keep finding folded clothes where people used to be, you start to listen that day." Construction was slow. Not from laziness, just from caution. No one said it, but everyone moved a little slower, lifted a little more carefully, and avoided the shadows like they were alive. At midday, a new worker arrived, young, quiet, wore a red string around his wrist. "Protection," he said when I asked. "My grandmother tied it before I left." "What's it protect you from?" He looked at the wall. "From forgetting." He didn't elaborate. That afternoon, I was assigned to hauling mortar, again, which meant carrying buckets of the sticky rice and lime mix from the cook tent to the foundation layers, uphill both ways, at least, it felt like it. As I trudged up the path, something weird happened. I stepped into a shadow and felt colder, not like brisk cold, like loss. It hit my chest, made my teeth clench. I stepped out of the shadow, and it vanished. I tested it again. Shadow, freezing sunlight, warm. I didn't say anything. Who'd believe me? We all felt weird things lately. It was part of the job now. By late afternoon, the foreman gave us an unexpected break. Everyone scattered, murmuring about how even demons need naps. I walked along the edge of the new wall section, past piles of unused stone and dried mortar buckets. That's where I found something I hadn't seen before. A circle of trowels, laid out in the dirt, perfect, like a wheel. 6 of them, tips pointing inward, handles like spokes. In the center, a smooth black stone, no names, no footprints, just the pattern. I didn't touch it that night. We sat around the fire again, me, Deng, Liang, Suni, and the red string kid, who we now called Thread. I heard something earlier, Suni said, brushing ash from her sleeve. Another whisper. She shook her head. A song. We all looked up. "What kind of song?" I asked. "Child's song. Not Chinese. Older. Deeper. Could have been wind." "Wind doesn't sing in rhythm," she replied, eyes locked on the fire. Wei, who had just returned from his shift, dropped a piece of broken brick beside us. "Found this carved into it." We leaned over. It was a symbol like the spiral, but with a single line slashed through it. A broken circle. No one spoke, because we'd all seen that shape before. On the banners of the old rebel clans, on burned scrolls, and on stones that never quite stayed in place. That night, before sleep, I checked my belongings. Trowel, water jug, pebble, coin, all there, except my sandals were wet, not damp. Wet. I hadn't been near water all day. I dried them in the firelight and lay back, heart pacing itself into the pillow. In my dream, the wall wasn't stone. It was teeth, and I was walking its length alone. Every step forward, the wall behind me closed, clamped shut. I woke up sweating, and in the tent, no one was snoring. That's how I knew I wasn't the only one who'd had the dream. This place, it was doing something to us, not killing us, changing us. Why I'm here? Yeah, I guess it's time. Everyone has their how I ended up on the wall story. Usually it's short and kind of dumb. You took the wrong shortcut, said the wrong thing to the wrong magistrate, owed a debt, broke a law, or maybe just looked like someone who did. Doesn't take much to find yourself carted out to the empire's edge with a pickaxe and a promise no one intends to keep. Me. I stole a chicken. A chicken. Except I didn't actually steal it. It followed me. I was delivering grain to the next village over, and the thing just started waddling after me. I figured, great, free dinner. I didn't know it belonged to the mayor's cousin's wife's cousin. Apparently, in that family, chickens are a symbol of status, of pride. So I'm dragged to court, accused of theft, disrespect, and corrupting local poultry. The judge doesn't even look up from his scroll. Labor wall, go. And here I am. Funny, right? Deng's story was better. He was a soldier who'd refused an order. Simple as that. His general said, charge, Deng. He said, that's a cliff. General said, do it anyway. Deng said, I like living. Next day, he's in chains. Liang. He insulted a scholar during an exam. Something about the man's beard looking like a broom used by ghosts. 10 years labor. Suni, her village, refused to pay double taxes. The empire didn't like collective resistance, so they took one person from each family, just grabbed her, shoved her in a wagon, and said, congratulations, you're a builder now. And Thread, well, we never got Thread's story. Every time someone asked, he just smiled. But I had a feeling his didn't involve poultry. The thing is, none of our stories mattered up here. The wall didn't care why you were there. It only cared what you could lift, how long you could last, and how quiet you could die. But at night, under the sagging canvas of our tent, sometimes we'd talk, not just about why we came, but about what we left behind. I told them about my sister, who used to hum while sewing, about the smell of sweet plum soup on festival days, about my dog, who chased shadows like they owed him money. Deng talked about a girl he almost married, before he learned she liked his uniform more than his face. Liang described a cherry blossom tree that bloomed behind his house every year, and how he measured spring not by the calendar, but by the day it dropped its first pink petal. Suni didn't say much, but once she described a dream she had about a bridge made of paper, held together by names written in ink. If you forget who you are, she said, the bridge collapses, and you fall into a river that makes you forget even that. We all stared at her. I mean, she said, shrugging. It was very vivid. Those moments, they kept us alive more than the food did, because when your whole day is lifting, stacking, tamping, hauling, and your nights are filled with ghosts, and whispers, memories are the only thing that don't weigh you down. Well, not much. Anyway, was a guy named Ping. Big guy, quiet. He barely spoke, but once, while fixing a mortar crack, he looked up and said, I used to be a singer. We all blinked. Then he sang low, deep, a song so old it didn't have words, just sounds, notes that felt like dust settling on skin, or wind through bones. It made you want to close your eyes and forget where you were, maybe even who. And afterward, he never sang again, but that song, still in my head, still there. The wall takes your voice, eventually, but the echo lingers. One night, after a particularly brutal shift, I asked Deng a question I'd been carrying for weeks. If we had the chance right now to leave, would you? He didn't answer at first. Then, leave to where? This wall's not the edge of the empire. It's the edge of meaning. What's past here? Wilderness, more walls. Another kind of prison. I looked at him. So we stay because there's nothing else. He shook his head. We stay because here, we matter, even if we don't want to, even if no one remembers us. The stones do. I laughed. You think stones have memories now? He leaned back and looked up at the stars. I think we're all turning into them. And maybe he was right. Maybe we were becoming part of the wall. Grain by grain, name by forgotten name. One day, a tourist might walk these stones and say, amazing what they built, not knowing who we were, not knowing we sang, and laughed, and loved, and screamed, and carved names into the bricks because we needed to mean something. So yeah, that's why I'm here, because of a chicken. But what keeps me here? It's not punishment, it's not fear. It's the people I've met, the stories we share, the strange, fragile little moments of being, because even here on a ridge of stone, under a sky that forgets, we found a way to remember each other. The thing about hope is it's dangerous, more dangerous than the crumbling edge of a cliff, or a loose brick balanced wrong, or even the foreman when he's holding a tally stick, because hope makes you think, makes you look past the horizon and wonder if maybe there's still a life waiting for you that doesn't involve waking up in dirt and going to sleep in fear. So when someone tries to leave the wall, it sends ripples through the whole. Camp that day started like any other. Early, cold, exhausting. I was back on hauling duty, because apparently I looked sturdy. Narrator voice. He was not sturdy. Liang and I were halfway up the slope with loaded baskets when we noticed the murmuring, quiet voices, avoiding eye contact, a guard running, not walking toward the west gate. Something was up. By mid-morning, we knew someone had run. A builder named Yu, skinny, fast, barely 20. He'd been transferred in just 2 weeks ago. We all remembered him because he smiled too easily. That should have been a clue. They found his robe near the tree line. A guard whispered, tracks headed north. toward the ridges, toward freedom, or so we imagined. For the rest of the day, everything moved weird, not slower, more nervous, like people were working while listening for hoofbeats, because everyone knew what came next. By evening, he was back, dragged behind a horse, alive, barely, bleeding from the nose, knees, mouth, stripped of his belt, his shoes gone, and one eye already puffing shut. The guards threw him into the mud like he was trash. We all stared. The foreman arrived, holding a long wooden pole. You'd think, by now, the image of public punishment wouldn't faze us, but it did, because you looked useless, like someone had removed his skeleton. You break the line. You break the law, the foreman shouted. Then he raised the pole. We didn't look away, not because we were brave, because looking away was worse. That was when the guards assumed you were next. Deng stood beside me, unmoving, his fists clenched. Liang bit his lip until it bled. Even Waystone-faced, unblinking, Wei closed his eyes. Just once. The pole cracked down. Once. Twice. 10 times. The sound wasn't like in stories. It wasn't dramatic. It was wet. Wood on meat. It made your stomach not. When it was done, you didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just lay there, and that was almost scarier. Suni and a few others quietly moved to lift him once the foreman walked off. He was taken to the supply tent unofficially, our infirmary, if you could call a space with moldy mats and 2 jars of bitter root, an infirmary. Later that night, the camp was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Even the fire cracked. Soft. No one made jokes. No one hummed. Until Deng spoke. I get it, he said. We looked over why he ran. He poked at the fire with a stick, eyes on the coals. Not because he thought he'd make it, but because he needed to try. Just once, to remember that his legs still belonged to him. Liang nodded slowly. He got caught. Yeah, but for 5 hours, he was free. That sentence sat between us like a shared injury, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself imagine what freedom would look like. Not running through mountains, chased by dogs, not sneaking past guards in the dark, but something quiet. A warm meal, a dry bed, a day without stone under your nails and hunger in your bones. A name that meant more than a labor mark. I remembered my village, what little of it I could still hold on to. The old woman who sold pickled eggs. The smell of river wind through bamboo. My mother's voice, humming off-key, always forgetting the second verse of every song. I missed it so much I ached. That night, I sat near the edge of the ridge and looked at the stars. The red torch beacons weren't lit tonight, which meant either peace or negligence. Above, the sky felt wider than usual, like it had leaned in to listen. I think the wall is lonely, I whispered. Deng sat beside me. You think it wants us to leave? No, I think it knows we won't. And then he said something that chilled me more than the wind. I don't think the wall is meant to keep enemies out. I looked at him. I think it's meant to keep empire in. That idea, landed deep. What if the wall wasn't protection? What if it was a border, a cage? It made sense. Why else put so much effort into building something so vast, so long, so permanent, not just for defense, but for control? And we were the mortar. Our pain, our stories, our memories, they weren't accidents. They were part of the architecture. Later that night, I checked on you. He was breathing barely. Suni sat beside him, holding a cloth to his brow. She looked up at me and said, he smiled earlier. He what? Smiled. Said, I got to see trees. That broke me a little. Because yeah, trees are nice, but it takes losing them to realize how rare they are when all you know is stone. It snowed the next morning. Much at first, just a whisper of white across the ridges, like the sky was trying to erase everything in chalk. But by noon, the wall had vanished beneath a blanket of cold, and we were all walking on packed flakes. Instead of dirt. Snow changes everything, makes sound vanish, turns even the loudest labor site into a quiet, frozen dream. It's beautiful, until your fingers go numb, your sandals soak through, and you realize your only pair of trousers now doubles as your gravecloth. We weren't prepared. Of course not. The supply tent had exactly 6 coats, 6 for over 40 people. So we did what we always did, layered rags, shared sleeves, tied twine around our ankles. Like that made a difference. Deng's nose was red enough to guide an ox cart. If I stop moving, just leave me. If you stop moving, I'm roasting your thigh like a winter festival ham, Liang said. fair. That day's assignment was clearing snow from the construction path. You'd think, shovel, sweep, done. But no, the wall doesn't allow easy. The snow had mixed with dust and mortar, turning into a gritty sludge that stuck to everything. Our brooms were made of straw and hope, and you couldn't even spit without it freezing before it hit the ground. Even the foreman looked miserable, his robe stiff with frost. He shouted less. Not from kindness, his lips were too cold to move properly. Historically, snow wasn't uncommon along the wall, especially in the higher elevation passes. The cold seasons slowed construction, but never stopped it. Work until the emperor sleeps was the phrase. And guess what? He never napped. We shoveled in shifts. 10 minutes on, 10 off. Otherwise your fingers cracked open like overcooked dumplings. I had 3 open cuts on my knuckles by lunch. When I tried to rub them warm, the blood froze. Literally. Do we get extra rations for surviving frostbite? I asked. Lang laughed. You get extra work. That's the reward. Still, there was something different today. Something quiet in the snowfall. A kind of peace. Almost wind dropped off, and everything felt slower. Even the wall looked less threatening. Covered in white, its sharp edges softened. It felt more like a sleeping beast than a hungry one. Then I saw the footprints. Just one set. Not near the usual paths. Not on the workers' trails. A single set of prints, leading from the ridge down to the southern wall base. But no return tracks. Pointed it out to Suni. She narrowed her eyes. Not from this morning. How do you know? She knelt, brushed the edge of a print. Too deep. To clean the snows, still soft. This was made after dawn. But I haven't seen anyone go that way. Exactly. We followed them. Slowly, quietly. They led to the half-finished tower where supplies had been stored. The door creaked. When we pushed it open, inside, nothing, except for the spiral. Again, drawn in ash on the wall. Larger now, cruder, angrier, and a line of pebbles arranged beneath it. 11, to be exact, I counted. Recounted. 11 people had gone missing since I arrived. The same number. I backed out. We didn't report it. Not to the foreman. Not to anyone. It wasn't superstition anymore. It was a pattern. That evening, the kitchen served hot broth. Real broth. Probably flavored with rat bone or sorrow. But hot. And that counted for a feast. We sat around the fire, steam rising from our bowls like prayers. For the first time in days, someone laughed. A real laugh. Thread told a joke, something about an ox, a monk, and a rooster. I don't remember the punchline, but I remember the sound it made, like a bell in winter. We're still here, Deng said, raising his bowl. We're not frozen yet, Liang added. Even Wei smiled, sort of. His face moved slightly. For him, that was a grin. The stars came out crisp and sharp above us, and the snow glittered like someone had spilled crushed glass over the world. It was beautiful. It was terrifying, because now we knew the wall could be quiet, that it could stop hissing and shifting and groaning, and just watch. We slept warmer that night, thanks to extra firewood, but my dreams were colder. I dreamed of the spiral, bigger now, spinning across the sky, pulling names from my chest, one by one, whispering them back to me in voices that weren't mine. When I woke, I was gripping the pebble so tight it had left an imprint in my palm. I held it up to the FIRELIGHT. It was warm. It shouldn't have been outside. The snow was falling. Again, softer now, almost gentle, like the wall was tucking us in. You'd think kindness wouldn't survive here. Not after the cold. Not after the whippings, the disappearances, the frostbite that turned one guy's toes the color of rotten figs. You'd think that everything soft gets scraped away by the stone. But somehow, it doesn't. Sometimes, it hides. And sometimes, it shows up in the smallest, most unexpected moments, like a seed breaking through granite. It was a cold morning. Again, they were all cold now. I'd torn the last layer of my inner shirt, lifting a frozen plank, and the chill sank straight to my ribs. I could barely feel my fingers. I don't mean, oh wow, it's cold. I mean, I tried to scratch my neck and slapped myself in the eye instead. We were moving bricks against Shocker when I stumbled. Nothing dramatic, just slipped on a patch of slick frost near the eastern trench and dropped to one knee. My hands hit the stone. I heard a pop in my wrist, the kind of sound you don't want to hear unless you're making popcorn. The foreman noticed. I braced myself. He didn't move, just turned and shouted at someone else, probably saving his energy for shouting about real problems, like the color of our sweat, or how many pebbles were left in the path. I sat there for a second, breathing hard, trying to decide if the pop meant temporary ouch, or start learning to shovel with your face. Then a hand reached out. Not Deng's, not Liang's, one of the soldiers. We called him Redcap because of his old, frayed winter hood. Never said much, kept to the side. Always cleaned his spear like he was hoping it'd turn into something else. He didn't speak, just helped me up, reached into his sleeve, and handed me a flat cake. I blinked. What is this? Barley, honey, pinch of spice, he muttered. Made it last week, but you're a guard. Not today. He walked off before I could say thanks. That cake. Best thing I've tasted all year. It wasn't sweet. Not really. But it was soft, still warm from his body heat. And it didn't taste like punishment. It tasted like memory, like care, like someone remembered how to cook for joy instead of survival. I ate half and saved the rest. By afternoon, word spread, quietly, but clearly. The soldier, his real name was Min, had once been a baker, drafted during a rebellion, reassigned to war watch, and forgotten he'd been baking little things in secret, using stolen rations, traded root powder, even crushed nuts, passing them to workers when no one was watching. And the crazy part, no one turned him in, not even the other guards, because even out here you protect what's human. Later that day, we passed through a new section of the wall under construction, a stretch built too fast. You could see the gaps between stones, the uneven mortar, the way the bricks leaned like tired men in the wind. I ran my hand along one. Someone had carved 3 letters into the side. Min, not big, not deep, just there. A name etched into a world that tried to erase names. I kept walking. My wrists still ached, but the pain wasn't as sharp anymore. That night, I gave the other half of the cake to Thread. He took one bite and nearly wept. There's cinnamon, he whispered, eyes wide. We passed it around. Everyone took a crumb, even Wei. And no one said a word about the taste, because what mattered wasn't the flavor, it was the reminder that we hadn't become stone entirely. Around the fire, Liang started humming again. That same tune, the lullaby made of dust and sleep and stubbornness. Suni joined in, then Deng, low and rough. It wasn't music, it was resistance. I looked around at all of them, these half-starved, half-frozen, half-forgotten strangers who had somehow become my family. My people, not because we shared blood, but because we shared pain. And more importantly, we shared the choice to be kind anyway. Even here, especially here, as I lay down to sleep. The snow started again. The flakes hit the tent in soft, scattered patterns. I listened to them fall. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't scared. I wasn't even angry. I was just here, alive, and holding on. They don't ring a bell when someone dies. There's no ceremony, no moment of silence, no final rites with incense and prayer. On the wall, you just stop showing up. And the work keeps moving, one stone after another. Today, I realized I was one of the old ones now. It snuck up on me. Not in years, maybe, but in where. My hands are calloused in places I never imagined. My knees pop when I squat. I know which steps creak, which paths freeze over first, which guard will look the other way when you take a little too long wiping your brow. Thread didn't come to breakfast. We waited, half expecting him to shuffle in with some new proverb, or half-burned tea root in his hands. He didn't. No one said anything. Even the foreman looked around once, then kept passing out bricks. Later, I went to his tent. It was tidy, blankets folded, tools clean. His red string, the one tied by his grandmother, left behind, looped around the handle of his water jug, like a quiet goodbye. I didn't cry. Not exactly, but I did sit down next to that jug and whisper his name 3 times, just in case the wall really is listening. That day's work was laying capstones along the top of a new tower segment. That meant climbing scaffolds, hoisting heavy slabs with pulleys and ropes that hadn't been checked in weeks. A storm had cracked one of the beams. When I told the foreman, he said, "Then don't fall." Thanks for the tip. Liang, Deng, Suni, and I worked as a unit, like clockwork now. No wasted movement, no shouted instructions, just nods and grunts, and a shared rhythm that years ago would have taken a lifetime to build. At one point, Suni reached out and caught a brick just before it slipped from my hand. Her fingers closed around mine. "You still with us?" she asked. "Yeah, but the truth, part of me, WASN, single quotes T. Part of me was back in my village, watching my sister hang laundry on a line that sagged like an old back. Part of me was watching my father pretend the fire was hotter than it really was. Part of me was before the wall. Another part was after, because there has to be an after. Even here, even now, the sky turned gold in the late afternoon. Not a warm gold, just dry, faded, almost brittle. The kind of sky that makes you feel like you're walking inside a painting no one finished. The foreman came up the ridge with a scroll. Orders from the capital. New quotas, new crew rotations, a list of names, reassigned to a fresh section 20 Li West. Deng's name was on the list, so was Sunis. Liang and I stayed behind. We didn't say goodbye like people do in towns. No hugs, no dramatic promises, just handshakes. And in Su's case, a silent touch on the shoulder. We keep building, Deng said, until he smiled, until someone remembers us. Then they left. The work kept going, even with fewer hands. That night, the wind picked up again, sharp and strange. I lay on my mat and listened to it curl around the tent. A whistle, a sigh, a voice I almost recognized. I dreamed again of the spiral only. This time, it wasn't spinning. It was still. And in the center, I saw us. Not just me. All of us. Deng, Liang, Suni, Thread, even Redcap, standing side by side, holding trowels like swords. Faces sunburnt and serious, building not a wall but a story. And as I woke, I realized something. Maybe we never leave the wall. Maybe no one does. Maybe every stone laid, every song hummed, every name carved. Maybe those are the real wall. Not bricks, not mortar, but memory. The next morning, I carved one more name into the stone. Just one word. Thread. Then I picked up my tools. And kept building. The snow has stopped. The winds have died down, and all that remains now is a ridge of stone curling through mountains, quiet and ancient still, holding the names of those who gave themselves to it. Tonight, you walked a day just one with those builders. You carried the weight of stone, felt the bite of frost, and shared a bowl of gruel with men and women who never made it into the history books, but who built something vast and eternal anyway. You met Deng, whose laughter cut through pain, Liang, who measured spring in petals, Suni, with her paper bridge dreams, and Thread, who smiled too easily for a place like this. And maybe, just maybe, you saw yourself in them. That's the truth of it, isn't it? Behind every monument, every empire, every history book's triumph, there are people, real ones, tired, scared, brave, kind. They never get remembered the way emperors do, but their fingerprints are still on the stone. If you listen closely, you can hear them in the cracks, the hum of memory beneath your feet. So wherever you are now, beneath your blanket, beside a flickering screen, know this: you've walked the wall. You've felt what it's like to be forgotten, and to keep going anyway. And maybe that's the most human thing of all. Now, close your eyes. Let the wind fade. Let the stones soften. You've earned your rest. You're safe. You're remembered. You're home. Good night, everyone.